a technique for everything. So enormous, so immense and so entire. The normative definitions. Britannica definition of technique, a way of doing something by using special knowledge or skill. We learned some techniques for X, Y or Z. Britannica definition of technology, the application of scientific knowledge to the practical aims of human life or to the change and manipulation of the human environment. The Old Testament tells of our progenitors, Adam and Eve. They lived in some paradise, apparently in total innocence until a serpent, the devil, enticed them to eat the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. As punishment for their disobedience, God banished Eve and Adam from paradise. Why is the forbidden fruit often called an apple? Or was it really forbidden? Regardless of the biblical symbolism of the apple as sin, allow me to symbolize the fruit as a form of enlightenment, as the birth of technique, a tremendously powerful seduction that allowed human beings to invent techniques, to conceive the potter's wheel, devise superior tools, domesticate animals, build bridges, make huge temples and castles, and to eventually dominate the entire earth. Techniques that are also characteristic of all things modern and superior. Hence technique with a capital T, would eventually become so enormous, so immense and so entire, that human beings would no longer be able to cope or control it. Worse, entirely depend on it as means for almost everything. That reality which has become an end in itself, from birth to death, a process to which we must adapt ourselves, and continuously, or be discarded as the technically inferior or illiterate. But who wants to be banished from paradise, or modernity and liberal society? For the context of this story, I will not focus on technology and the power presence of machines, instead on technique as the principal character, one which has eventually gained total autonomy, the real winner. A way better way to understand the meaning of technique would be how Jacques Ellul defined it as the ensemble of practices by which one uses available resources to achieve values. More so over time, technique has become universal and autonomous, as fact. Technological society is why this story is not so much about our lost unity and what techniques we may apply to evolve, but about the underlying fact that our identity, values and corresponding worldview are an outcome of several totalitarian techniques and corresponding practices, economies and societies, a world where there is a technique for everything. 1. Over a long time, technical means of production and organization evolved in thousands of ways, ever faster in velocity and complexity. Unavoidably, such a trajectory gradually surpassed our unchanging biological and spiritual capacities. Imagine the figure of an indigenous person looking at a megacity for the first time, or say my long-dead grandfather navigating through metaverse today. The innovation and progress is only justified or made sense of by those who have totally internalized the presence of technology and all its corresponding techniques. A set of techniques that you and I are currently used to, and take for granted, were mostly unheard of, in the not-so-distant past. In that aspect, technology and techniques have no limits, a popular affirmation that is repeated again and again by technological experts. Yes, magic, healing or transhumanism offer even new techniques to overcome our spiritual and biological limitations. A hyper-connected globalized society, defined by ever-technically superior systems, human beings and animals, all integrated and articulated, as components of technological society. To force every stage of human activity is to control human beings, to submit to its mathematical calculations, corresponding machines, procedures, appliances, gadgets, tools and grids, whereby the totalitarian victory of techniques is obvious, albeit something we seldom address, even less challenge. The modern world will not function without universal techniques, Ted Kaczynski, and then it hardly matters if we live within a fascist or capitalist or communist setup, situated in the global north or south. No matter whether we speak Chinese or English or Spanish or Arabic or Hindi, is technique and not human beings, that is most often considered as the prime instrument of performance, be it in the economics, politics, arts or sport. 2. The analysis and critique of totalitarian techniques is almost entirely missing within Marx's discourse of modern history, labor and society. It seldom shows up within left intelligentsia circles, radical action groups, feminist organizations and even conservative right-leaning institutions. With such tacit internalization, while the above groups are engaged in furious debates, historical analysis, social activism or sometimes violent street clashes, they all remain subserviently attached to existing techniques of propaganda, production and distribution. The past 100 years, there have been few insightful philosophers, theologians, historians and writers who understood and began to address the presence of totalitarian techniques and technology. Lewis Mumford, Herman Melville, Julius Evola, Murray Bookchin, William R. Catton and most well-known Jacques Ellul explored the deeper impacts of incoming technology and technique during the 20th century. More contemporary to our age are writers and anarcho-philosophers like Giorgio Agamben, David Graeber, Ted Kaczynski, Franco Bifo Berardi and Paolo Verno to name a few. So what is so bad about technique, without which none of the brilliant inventions in technology would be possible, or the amazing methods to overcome the big challenges, and all those techniques which have helped human beings grow more and more intelligent and sentient? How can we discount all that? A sufficiently useful response to such a fundamentalist viewpoint or existing global myth is the fact that it is techniques and not human beings that frame the values which can produce at last a monolithic or universal world culture in which all non-technological difference and variety is mere appearance or simulation. Entire aspects of governance, industry, military, trade, economics, media, communication, propaganda, popular art, culture, movies, sports, gastronomy etc. all become synonymous with one or another set of techniques, practiced by many people, is the practice, and not the people, which symbolizes current society, even the necessity of social progress, equal rights and opportunities as derived by socio-economic techniques. Even better, that stuff like political personality, media coverage, time management culture, civil society, social responsibility of business, protection of democracy etc. can all be mapped out as a set of social techniques, aimed at objectives nearly impossible to achieve in reality. The Chinese regime, 1960 to 1990, developed successful techniques to destroy reproductive rights of Chinese women, albeit new ecological and urban disasters followed, not anticipated as an outcome of terrible socio-economic techniques coupled with limitless industrialization, contamination, land use and pollution. From the lowest to the highest positions within such society, it is techniques that guarantee one thing above all else, that every part of existing civilization will respond to the social needs generated by technique itself. Whatever comes in contact of technique and technology is thus converted or reorganized to conform to the objectives that are almost entirely non-human and non-living. Surprised face with open mouth. 3. Early human beings, as empowered by new techniques, were not subject to media, the plural form of medium, the means of mass communication, recording, broadcasting, publishing, live video, the internet etc. is viewed and regarded collectively. Is obvious that today almost all media that dominates popular culture and global communication is a technological outcome and based on a set of media techniques. So was the case 20 or 40 years ago, yet few people were skilled enough to be part of it. Big deal if it is breaking now on YouTube or Rumble, TikTok or Instagram, Metaverse or YouHive. All that media and mediatization is based purely on this set of techniques that is commonly practiced by millions of people every day. Most visible and audible as of now is the mass proliferation of indie media, or if we wish to view it as an economy of creativity, knowledge, identity, outrage, discourse, speculation, denial or conspiracy. So many people who live online reading out Twitter posts made by someone else, and that is just one of the definitive techniques within such a meaningless media gluttony. Fact that almost every indie media channel is speculating over Donald Trump's return to power all at the same time is itself a matter of technique. Just follow Judge Napolitano and Ray McGovern. Time and again we are told that independent media plays a vital role in strengthening democracy. Oxford reference. Situate the claim however you wish, yet historically speaking mass media is always dependent on great capital investments. As just one example, take the 850,000 miles of submarine cables that can wrap the equator about 30 times. The same can be said about the proliferation of the internet, about the devices, about cloud storage and computing, about video conferencing, content publishing, etc. The exabytes of data are zettabytes tomorrow, but the indie part, which we are all good with, would never be possible without the superfluous range of affordable software, laptops, video cameras, microphones, USB sound cards, speakers, lights, etc., all bound together into a set of techniques whereby anyone can broadcast anything. Is why we can view almost everything in the world vicariously. What looks and sounds like an amazing proliferation of do-it-yourself culture, make your experience, is actually so look-alike and sound-alike because of the very set of techniques that we have to comply with. Only then does the system generate results to fulfill all our social, political and personal desires. Surrogate activities. 4. Within this escalation of independent mediums and broadcast culture, one can find almost everyone and anyone who is connected to a globally validated practice of media techniques. The guy presenting a discourse on the Quran follows the same techniques as the professor explaining degrowth, or the academic preaching revolutionary politics, or the expert of geopolitical events who follows the same totalitarian set of techniques followed by a conspiracy guru or raving cult figures like Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson. None of them have any real choice within this form of media, regardless of what they are raving about. At the receiving end, common people like us follow another set of techniques to internalize, absorb, discard and or multiply the same media and mediums. The list of broadcasters and the faces within are limitless, but the techniques of production and validation remain altogether same, with exceptional cases that may differ. Historic unprecedented danger shows up thousands of times a day in dozens of languages. A total success of media techniques above all else. Entirely common, on the back end her distribution techniques which allow us to view millions of videos, photos, posts and reels, but may have no impact on the actual concerns situated within the media of violence, public outrage, global anxiety, war, conspiracy, disease, fragmentation of society, etc. Concurrent propaganda and counter-propaganda is an outcome of media techniques or a liberal desire to render justice or a pathway towards a just world. You decide that. For certain people the internet and everything that goes on within would be a boring or totally unpalatable experience only if they did not have the technical knowledge or the irresistible urge to navigate the possibilities of limitless cyberspace and cyber time. People pushing real or virtual buttons, sending and receiving data, temporal social engagements and agreements, all which disappears into the proverbial ether. Yes, but who cares about such fringe people really, when we as a species have altogether gone far from being an end in ourselves. Techniques, however easy or complex, that effectively drive our practices also frame the eventual output and consequently it can direct our very convictions. 5. About the perfection of social techniques, without accounting for the success of organized military, this story would be incomplete. History is packed with praise for the organizational success of military power from around the world. The genesis of organized military action can be traced back to the ancient epics, 6000, 7000 BCE, and so it only grew bigger and mightier over time, with the Mauryans, Romans, Mongols, Ming, Ottomans, French, British and now American, Russian, Chinese, etc. But the size of current military organization is directly proportional to the number of soldiers, because today's armies are way smaller in comparison to their medieval counterparts, yet gigantic in organization, including all the techniques of warfare, surveillance, offensive and counter-offensive strategies, war games, simulations, precision strike mechanisms, rapid deployment, etc., etc. The eventual deployment of military techniques into the administration of prison systems, mental asylums, juvenile wards, even hospitals and airports, where a similar set of militarized techniques, Michael Foucault, panopticon, disciplinary society, form a single system of control and surveillance. As a set of techniques, what was practiced by officers, doctors, nurses and correction experts can now be done better and faster via artificial intelligence. Call it a matter of security techniques, which makes London the most watched city in the Five Eyes Circle of nations. But our participation and navigation through all topographies with such techniques is not only based and rendered upon on privately owned technology, but also an aggregation of centralized ungovernable power, the ungovernable part, with or without military escalation and all the consequent blowbacks and violence. Seeming rivals, situated on two ends of a geopolitical fracture, China, Russia and the US are three exemplars of military techniques and technology that have continuously evolved to protect their industrial complex, limitless expansion of capital, material generation and energy use. All military techniques in the state-of-the-art technology is hooked in all stop, cheap non-renewable energy. All three powers, backed by a similar set of technologies that also point to a shared devotion to fossil capital, future of denial. Let us ask, if the American, Russian or Chinese business and ruling class is actually willing to give up hundreds of trillions of dollars in fossil fuels, unless they are forced to do so? The answer to that question is no, yet most often includes a range of mitigations such as carbon capture, carbon offsets, green-colored technologies, decentralized electricity, degrowth practices, eco-friendly products, net zero, etc., etc. Regardless of such interventions, current techno-industrial society is simply unable to sustain itself without undermining the weakest and poorest people, at a regular frequency. Not only are the new techniques and corresponding technologies ever more destructive, but also rapidly evolving towards totalitarian objectives that serve the interests and existing privileges of very few people. What about the others? Or worse, if we consider ourselves as part of the surplus? The answer to that, we can learn from capital, what to do with any surplus, to exclude or experiment with, or to imprison, or better outright elimination. What best set of techniques would capital impose upon a mass surplus? 6. Jacques Ellul warned incoming generations about the totalitarian outreach of techniques as the only fully spontaneous activity of the modern world. He spared the arts and sciences as other human activities, and in hindsight the man was spot on. Though now we can situate both the artist and scientist as two experts most often practicing a set of robust techniques 50 years past that devastating verdict. A lot has evolved in terms of common technical knowledge and the evolution of technologies. Not every modern technique and technology is out to undermine us. That said, the underlying presence of technique that equates to fact is something we modern human beings can never let go, not under current circumstances. Technique is not a part of our DNA, yet it is sufficiently embedded within every aspect of society and life that mass deployment, change or desired impact is not possible without an evolved technique, commonly practiced by people. Like in the past, incoming future technologies and their corresponding techniques will also converge towards the interests of capital. Contrary to what is projected by a range of reformists using several new techniques, while situated within capitalist or partially socialist nations, the deployment of almost every major technology is directed and manifested by and in favor of capital, and not so much for the entire population. To understand this better, we can imagine 10 billion people living on Earth, thriving or not, by early 2050 UN population projection. The most pessimistic models reveal that a large part of the global population will be deemed surplus for capital and global industry, or as many experts and fans of depopulation who opine for the excess or overshoot to disappear. During the same time span, overall food production is set to decrease. IPCC Global Food Security, a steady rise in not just global temperatures but also unemployment and food scarcity. The corresponding techniques of administration and regulation of everything important, including food, water, energy, clean shelter and secure habitat, will favor those few that are prepared or not considered surplus and those situated outside overshoot. Called high-confidence models, the range of predictions and interventions fail to include the impact of rising wealth inequality, of war and ethno-nationalism. Point being, as time goes by, survival techniques will become way more prescient for a vast majority of people. While rejecting the entire myth of progress, we may learn way better techniques from those who are already facing annihilation and genocides. 7. The portending alliance between capital, energy, military techniques, new destructive technologies and the will to eliminate innocent people can be seen and felt in the ongoing wars and geopolitical conflicts. What is now being called hell on earth is also a testing ground for artificial intelligence, used by Israelis to kill innocent Palestine civilians or even destroy food trucks and medical aid. The new techniques of genocide, equally devastating, is the deployment of military drones and landmines by the Russians and Ukrainians, aimed at each other's civilians, including children, is abhorrent but necessary to make children participate in landmine education. Or is it just another survival technique within all these specters of unmitigated death? What becomes obvious is the role of technology as well as unchecked, unprecedented play-out of military techniques. Not only have AI corporations that are mostly situated in the West failed to uphold human rights commitments in times of war, they have also dismissed and punished anti-war, anti-genocide voices. Microsoft is one such example that is empowering the genocide in Gaza by all means, as revealed by an ex-employee recently fired. The overall convergence of military escalation, shockingly powerful technology and the rise of ethno-nationalism can also be mapped out as new techniques of control. Ones that can be deployed against a large population, regardless of country or ethnicity in the coming future, to achieve two things above all else. 1. Take care of the so-called population problem. 2. Make sure that the remaining population is effectively indentured by new technological regimes and corresponding evolution of lawless techniques, entirely geared to sustain various types of tyranny, imperialism, sadism and techno-fascism. In such a world, trapped between the extreme and the ordinary, whereby there will be no real individual agency. 8. To be fair, there can be several techniques of the positive kind, and I am sure you know a few that make life better or happy. To list them out is a matter of choice and affordability, albeit our current reality is not exactly happy. In a civilization so widely defined by technique, I feel no shame to concede that even the outward show of happiness and feeling content is sometimes bought at the price of total acquiescence. That said, I must have fulfilled certain techniques. Technique in its universal deployment eventually destroys what we know as unconscious awareness, what all goes within our irrational, biological and spiritual realms. Technique discounts individual potentiality. Alice, there is no technique in mourning. No technique for real solidarity. No technique in breakthrough creativity. No technique to really fall in love again. No technique to fix a heartbroken planet. Yes, there are thousands of techniques based around desire. Perhaps the unconscious within us is not an ally or friend of technique, far less of any existing modern technology. Like materialism and wealth, technique is also idealized and highly prized. Like the deployment of troops or big ideas or even deadly pathogens, Techniques have extended deep into society and our consciousness. Technique itself is the biggest sociological phenomenon, and for whatever its worth and power, we humans are still not blind, nor should we be subject to its finality. Is it not just another technique to make a judgment on tomorrow before it arrives? Written by Audio Pervert. Read, share and subscribe to the counterintuitive audiopervert.substack.com.